come for this work. Sign me up, I come for this work. Sign me up, I come for this work. Sign me up, I come for it. Boss lady, I come for this work. Sign me up, I come for this work. Sign me up, I come for this work. So put a work in front of me, and I go get in right away. I'm gonna put me back in it, for your working company. So put a work in front of me, and I go come in right away, and let me put me back in it.
Hi folks, good evening and thank you so much for joining me. How many of you have reached? Hi Lenleys, good night. I see you are there on YouTube. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Michelle is there on Facebook. Mervyn is on Facebook. Sule is on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining, guys. And to the rest of you that are entering and showing up. Marsha, Eva, Roundel, I hope I got it correct. Janelle Speth, Merlene, Carol, Liza. Nice to see every single last one of you. Because I know you have so much more. Y'all could be doing it your Sunday afternoon. You could be recovering from that heavy lunch that you had and taking a nap or watching a movie or something. But no, you take yourself 7 o'clock this evening and show up. Hi Barbara, how is it on YouTube? Hi Camille, I'm seeing you on YouTube. Hey, big up to Five Rivers. Nice to have Five Rivers in the house. Don Roberts. Hi Matthew from Jamaica. Matthew, you're Trinidadian, but in Jamaica, or you're Jamaican in Jamaica? Just wondering. I'm minding your business a little bit, so you could tell me. Hi Tremaine. Hi Althea. Hi Wendy. Hi Pamela. Hi Lynn. Hi Carl, Sally Ann, Theophilus, Barbara, Joy, Gary. Good evening to all of you. So many of you here. Hi Marlene in Tobago. Marlene, which village in Tobago are you locked in on? Right, good. Yes, good evening to Team YouTube. I'm glad to see that. I'm glad to have so many more persons joining YouTube. And when you see me gazing this way, it's because I'm looking at the feed. I should really start adding the stream here so that you can see it. I want more people to shift to YouTube, to transition to YouTube. Why? Because I think I've said it here before. I am looking to make the shift from Facebook onto YouTube and to have more content there than on Facebook, primarily because I find Facebook to be a very draining space. I just find there is just so much vitriol on Facebook, and we're going to be talking about some of that vitriol this evening on the live. So again, hello, good evening to every single last one of you. Scotty Rankin from Otahiti, nice to see you. Right, Trini in Jamaica, Matthew Rahamad. So Matthew, nice to have you, and I hope you're enjoying being in Jamaica. It's one of my favorite countries in the whole world to visit. Not just Caribbean island, in the whole world. It's one of, I mean, there are a couple other countries, but I like visiting Jamaica a lot. Who's from Vancouver? I just saw somebody from Vancouver. Hi Merle, I good, yes, I good, I can't complain. Today was one of those days where I did more sleeping than anything else. Sue Erickson from Vancouver. Dave from Paria. I hope I said that correct. Is it Paria? Paria. I tend to say Paria. Cindy, go and look for the channel on YouTube. Don't click on the advertisement link itself, because all that does is tell you that something is happening at 7 o'clock. You have to go to the channel itself, apparently. Hi Vonette. How life, how things. I don't even know which part of Trinidad you might be messaging me from at this point in time. Hopefully it's Point Fortin, so let me know how things are in Point Fortin. Hi Royce. Royce, I'm not switching entirely, in that I will continue to do lives on both platforms, because there are lots of people who use Facebook a lot, and Facebook works for them. But I also know that I have lots of people who aren't on Facebook who are on YouTube. It's easier to access things on YouTube, and I'm happy with the YouTube space. So I'll be casting or doing the lives on more than one platform, but I'm just saying, if more persons go over to YouTube, I'm really happy about that. Yes, so all you have to do is go and look for Newsauce on YouTube, hit like for the channel, hit subscribe, and also put on notifications. Because once you subscribe to notifications for the YouTube channel, it will let you know when something is happening, when something is coming up. And I spend a lot of time on YouTube. If I'm not YouTube is where I get the majority of my information and entertainment from, really. So I'm just, I'm recommending it to people. YouTube. Right, Elizabeth. That's the first time I've seen that name. Hi, Elizabeth. Hi, Stephen Harper. How you doing? I like it when handsome men hail me out on my lives. And let me also say good evening to Mrs. Harper, who is my biggest fan. Right? So it's not that I only hailing out Mr. Harper, I'm hailing out Mrs. Harper as well. You're from La Brea, close to Venezuela. Vonette, I hope you have passport and visa to be in Trinidad on this live. I'm just saying, right? I'm just saying. Right, so Barry is in the YouTube now. Good. Right. So I think I think everybody who wants to be here. Hi, Valencia. Good. Donna wants to know how Starboy is. Donna, Starboy is absolutely fine. Starboy right now is on his Sunday evening walk. All right, so he's off doing his Sunday evening walk, not taking me on. He's getting to be a very big boy and very thrilled about, all of his newly found mannish ways. So we go in and talk about employment and unemployment, because this week was a full week of either people applying for work, people tendering their resignation, people finally showing up to take up the work that was appointed to them however long now, questions about whether certain people are going to continue to have a work, somebody who decided he coming up with a whole scam to provide jobs for people, and then of course all of us who would have been trapped in Port of Spain at work wondering if we were going to be able to get home from work. So we're going to be discussing all of those things. So I'm doing a review of all of the major stories for the week, and then of course Antonio Decklan Ross is going to be joining me later on in the program so that we can talk about ways to secure the bag. We're going to talk about people who are on small and medium incomes. How do you go about using that money to generate investments for yourself? So how to use your money to, how to use your money to make money, how to use your money better. So Ross is going to come on here and he's going to discuss those things with us. Right. So, where we starting from? One of the first things that I noticed, and I would have talked about it a little bit last week, I pointed out to you last week that Marsha Lorraine Walker, who would have run for the Diego Martin West seat, that's the same seat as Dr. Rowley, she functioned as a temporary senator in the People Parliament last week. What I didn't know is that Marsha has a full-fledged appointment to function as a temporary senator whenever Senator Jayanti Lakshmi Dayal is out of the country. So there it was, announced in the Trinidad and Tobago Gazette, and it's there down at the bottom, appointment to be temporarily a member of the Senate, and it says, it is hereby notified for general information that Her Excellency the President, acting in accordance with the advice of the Leader of the Opposition, in exercise of the power vested in her by Section 44(1)(b), blah, 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 has appointed Marsha Walker to be temporarily a member of the Senate with effect from the 30th of June and continuing during the absence from Trinidad and Tobago of Senator Jayanti Lakshmi Dayal by reason of illness. So it appears that she is officially the replacement in the Senate for Jayanti Lakshmi Dayal. So I guess there will be a lot more of Marsha to be seen in the future. So we have to look out for that. We have things to look out for. So at the start of well, the end of last week rather, because it would have been either a Saturday or a Sunday press conference. I'm trying to remember. It would have been a Saturday, last week Saturday. So not yesterday, last week Saturday. We would have had Gary applying for a work. Now, I can't say the first time that this has happened, because Gary back in 2018 made it very public that he had applied to become Commissioner of Police. And what we're seeing here in 2022 is a repeat of a lot of what happened in 2018. Gary would have applied for the job, and then right after he applied for the job, he made a whole media tour. Everywhere, every radio station, every television station that he could possibly go to, he was there. Everywhere, talking about why he was the best person for the position. So last Saturday, which would have been July the 2nd, somewhere thereabouts, either July 2nd, July 3rd, Gary held his press conference. Now, I thought it was an NTA press conference. So I thought it was National Transformation Alliance or something, and that's right. So I thought it was the political party that he is the interim leader of that was holding a press conference. And one of these days, I have to talk about how we just set up political parties in this country and then just kind of automatically appoint ourselves as leaders. But we always put the title interim leader, and then you never hear a word about when there is going to be an election to have like a proper slate be voted in. So this party, the NTA, would have been launched sometime, was it early this year or late last year? The party would have been launched. Early this year, the party was launched. And since the party has been launched, he's the interim leader, and I don't know who any of the other office holders are. But that's the point. That's not the point right now. I will eventually get into the NTA, the PDP, and any number of other political parties where people start a party and immediately decide, I am the leader of the party, and then they call in other people to function in different roles. That's not how anybody should want a political party to function. And you should immediately start questioning how those parties function and the accountability structures within those parties when things like that take place. Anyhow, so Gary holds a press conference. And what struck me about the press conference, apart from the narcissism of coming to announce that I have decided to offer myself to be the Commissioner of Police again after you were fired, because he was ostensibly fired from the position. I was like, okay, all right. And then I looked at the persons who were sitting on that panel. So let me dim the screen on this end for a little bit, and we're going to look at this panel. So here you have Gary at the mic. Next to Gary is Peter George. Next to Peter George is Paul Daniel Naus. Next to Paul, I believe that is a former senior police officer. I think that is a former DCP. Then next to him is a former brigadier, Carl Alfonso. Next to Brigadier Carl Alfonso is one of Gary's former advisors, Dwight Andrews. And next to Dwight Andrews is Nairi Alfonso, who is the daughter of Brigadier Alfonso. And if I'm not mistaken, she was also on the First Citizens Bank board under the United National Congress. So let me discuss this panel a little bit. And there's a reason we're going to be discussing the panel a little bit. When this press conference took place, the entities involved spent a lot of time pointing out to people that this is not an NTA, it's not a National Transformation Alliance initiative. This is a group that calls itself the Concerned Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So it's meant to be some sort of patriotic group. So Concerned Citizens of Trinidad and Tobago show up at this press conference, and basically they're saying, that we all sitting here have nothing but the country's best interests at heart. And what we want to do is put forward our skills to create a crime plan for Trinidad and Tobago. So what the hell was Gary doing the 3 years he was Commissioner of Police? That would be my question. That was my first question in hearing the announcement from the press conference. What were you doing for 3 years when you were functioning as Commissioner of Police? How is it you didn't have a crime plan then? Because let's not forget that the highest murder statistics in the country occurred when Griffith was Commissioner of Police. So I looked at the entire panel, and there was a lot that they all had in common, but nobody mentioned it. And it's one of the things that irritates me about media. You call a press conference, media shows up at the press conference, and the questions that they need to be asking, the questions that they should ask, the questions that are obvious, they don't ask those questions. So nobody will ask Gary, well, how come you didn't have this plan for the last 3 years? And how come when you were in a position to pull all of these people together to work with you as a team, right? These concerned citizens as a team, how come that didn't happen then? Now, I want to say something. At that head table, there are at least two persons who were on the TTPS's payroll when Griffith was the Commissioner of Police. So how do you show up at a press conference and say, we're not politically affiliated. None of us here politically aligned. We are just concerned citizens. Paul Nows, right, worked under Griffith, was also a P&M councillor at a point in time. I think he has since left the Diego Martin Regional Corporation, and he's no longer affiliated with the People's National Movement. You have Brigadier Alfonso, who would have functioned as a Minister of National Security under the United National Congress. You have his daughter, Nairi Alfonso, who would have been an appointee to a state board under the Kamla Persad-Bissessa government. Her name also would have circulated in the whole bacchanal with the Cabo Star and the Galicia, because she would have functioned as a lawyer as well as a marine consultant / expert with this whole thing about procuring vessels, marine vessels for the government of Trinidad and Tobago. So you have a handful of persons there who would definitely politically align in one form or fashion or the other. Oh, sorry, he was an alderman, right? So Paul Daniel Naus was an alderman on the Diego Martin Regional Corporation Council, right? That municipal corporation. So why do you start off a press conference like this to mislead people? One, as my first question, why do you start off misleading people? Two, how come media present didn't push back and ask questions about those things? And so you see, the minute all them elephants running around in a room, me can't believe all you. Can't take all you with anything less than a pot spoon of salt. So that is that part of things. But right after Griffith would have made his announcement, he goes immediately on a media tour. Every single television station, every single radio station that would have him, I mean, all up the Caribbean, all up St. Lucia, wherever they would have him for an interview, he was there, basically positioning himself as the best person for the job. Now, there are a couple of things that we need to remember here. Griffith would have tendered his resignation from the army in disgrace, right? So 20 years ago, when he left the army, well, it might be a little bit more than 20 years, however many oho years ago, when he left the army, he tendered his resignation, and he tendered his resignation in disgrace. You'll remember, we would have sat here one evening and talked about Griffith's track record, and one of the reasons he would have tendered his resignation back then was because of scandals circulating about him and his conduct in the office of the Prime Minister, right? One to do with an alleged relationship between himself and the Prime Minister's daughter. And then, of course, budgetary concerns, right? Fiscal mismanagement of monies at the household. So there was that. Then thereafter, he would have started his own company, and he had his own company for quite some time. All of the jobs that he's had since then, he's been fired from. Fired as Minister of National Security, fired as the Commissioner of Police, and something that Gary always avoids when he's talking about having lost his job as the Commissioner of Police. Apart from the fact that a piece of legislation would have been gerrymandered to allow him to remain there. Legislation that everybody has since said was unconstitutional legislation. I sit down here, I was the first person to raise it. And after I raise it, big bacchanal in the court system. Right? But the legislation was unconstitutional. Griffith refuses to acknowledge the fact that the United States government wrote a letter indicating that he had violated human rights. Right? There is a letter from the United States government to our government that has indicated that the killing of 2 men in police custody, the deaths of those 2 men in police custody, was seen as a gross violation of human rights. He never references that. Never references it. So he goes on the media tour, and where do I find that? Just now, give me a second here, because I want to bring up an interview that he did this week. And there we go, right here.
What we discovered is that there were certain elements within the police service based on intelligence that were aiding and abetting and involved in serious criminal activity in this country. Massive. I stepped on those toes. Those were the same individuals whispered to politicians and told them, if Gary comes back, we're going to shut down the country. And they panicked, which is what caused the turnaround with my reappointment. So when I discovered a very small number, but these numbers, they were covering for criminal elements, they were protecting drug blocks, they were escorting criminal elements, there were certain police officers who deliberately tried to frame me to claim that I had pointed a gun, and they were linking with members of the media. They didn't know that that individual was my informant, and he exposed the fact that these officers wanted me out because I was affecting their drug turf and their drug blocks and their affiliation with criminal elements. That is how dangerous this thing is. It is dangerous business, a serious business, and instead of Mr. Jacob working with me for me to support him and advise him, he sees me as the enemy.
So the curious thing about that, and I'm going to bring the clip back up and speak to it. Gary sits down in that brief clip, and this is a clip that Gary himself put up on TikTok, right, to have circulated on TikTok. He talks about there being rampant corruption in the police service under him, and when he was trying to stamp out the rampant corruption, that's why he was removed. I don't know if you all remember the timeline last year. Gary's contract ended. Then his contract was renewed, and the whole bacchanal about him and the job and him not being able to continue on as Commissioner of Police was as a result of the report into what was going on with the FULs and how many people were getting FULs and the process by which people were getting FULs and whether or not there was a kickback system centered around the FULs. And that entire firearms issue was something that landed firmly under him. There was no other divisional head that was addressing the issuing of licenses for guns. When he came in as Commissioner of Police, he rearranged things so that everything fell under him. So I looked at that and I thought to myself, how do you get onto a media program, right? A media television program, and you are giving an interview, And the reporter, never, not once, in that span of time, right? In the span of time that you saw here, the reporter never once stops you and says, hey, but weren't you fired because of perceived corruption that was happening directly under you, that was linked to you because you were the person with direct and total oversight with respect to firearms? And then, of course, what went on with Chandler and the things on the boat, and whether, you know, Chandler was being protected or not being protected by the Commissioner of Police. So I looked at that piece of interview and I said to myself, one, he talking a lot and he's not even remembering half of what he's saying, and he's saying so much that he's going to trip himself up. And you know what, Gary, keep talking, because his sound bites is gold for me. Gold. When I get those sound bites, I sit down and say to myself, well, there we go, more content for my lives. But the other thing that I keep looking at is the way in which reporters just keep falling asleep on their work. Like them know what their work is. Like them soon might be looking for a work. So that was one of the things that I wanted us to take a look at. Next thing we're going to move on to now is all who fired the work this week. And the week was very interesting. You had this was the first piece of bacchanal. The Prime Minister had a press conference and he and a reporter, Darren Bahow, locked horns because Darren showed up to ask if the Prime Minister sure he keeping Reggie Armour as the Attorney General, based on what would have been going on with the Piarco case and the fact that Reggie Armour, back in the day, 25 years ago, would have been an attorney in the case. And so now that he's the Attorney General and it's the state that's prosecuting, he can't be a part of it. He has to recuse himself. And the Prime Minister, again this week, because there was the crosstalk between him and Darren Bahow, I think either the Saturday or the Sunday, whenever the Prime Minister held the press conference before he headed off. I think last week Saturday. So he had the press conference on Saturday, and then there was the post-cabinet press conference on Thursday, just gone 2-3 days ago. And in that press conference, Darren raised the questions again about the AG and whether or not the Prime Minister felt he was doing the right thing by keeping the AG there. Now, you know, the Law Association thinks that the AG ought to tender his resignation and step down, and they wrote an entire petition about it, blah, 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 blah. So, Darren get him off last week Saturday. Then he came back, and I mean, Matt wrote and various editorials were written, and I will say this. Matt is very convenient about when it writes to complain about journalists and freedom of the press, because they never write anything at all to indicate to journalists, hey, all you need to be telling the right thing, all you need to be giving the correct information. Because the last time we were here, I pointed out to you that Darren Bahow and the Newsday would have been responsible for misinformation about the Piarco 1 ruling that would have come out from the Privy Council. So they would have given the public the impression that the office of the DPP had said that there was not going to be any reprisal of the Piarco 1 case. And I read bits of what the office of the DPP said. And I also indicated to you all that there are multiple Piarco cases. Is Piarco 1 to 4. And so there was a lot of information that was not being conveyed as accurately as it could have been conveyed. Matt doesn't talk about those things. Matt somehow conveniently forgets to speak to its own membership and to remind its membership, you have a responsibility. You can't want to come and talk about the privilege of freedom of the press and not grasp that you have a responsibility to the population. Hi, Auntie Janice. Nice to see you. So, Darren comes back, speaks to the Prime Minister at the post-cabinet press conference on Thursday, again asking, do you think you made the right choice? And the Prime Minister, this time in a calmer mood, would have explained to him that as far as he's concerned, give me a second. The issue here is not an issue of firing. The issue here is that the AG has to recuse himself. That is what the ruling or the documents, the court documents coming out of Miami have indicated. And so the Attorney General has recused himself. So I'm going to keep an eye on whether there is a persistent angle about getting this new Attorney General out of office. Because I'm not sure why him recusing himself from the Piarco case isn't enough for the Law Association. But we will see how it goes. So they want Reggie Armour to fire the WOC, and thus far the Prime Minister has said, no, Reggie will not be firing the WOC, he just have to recuse himself. Then, apart from the Reggie Armour thing, there was this piece of bacchanal. Now, Boris finally fired the WOC on Thursday, but the firing of the WOC by this British Prime Minister, the UK Prime Minister, this was something that was building up. It was in the works. I don't know if you all know, I don't know if you all was following, that there had been a party that took place in the midst of COVID where the government ministers and them, they were part of the party. They had a bram. And with the bram that went down, they were in breach of COVID laws, of COVID rules. The rules that they would have, they themselves would have put in place. So Boris and his crew had a little party, breached the laws. They get catch with the whole business of breaching the laws. And earlier this week, a tsunami of resignations took place. All of a sudden, men developed consciences and tendered letters of resignation. And so one after the other, Tuesday would have been a handful of letters. Then by Wednesday, it would have been over 24 resignations. Then by Thursday morning, when Boris himself eventually decided he was going to be tendering his resignation, it was a little over 50 persons that would have tendered their resignation. Yes, Sule, it was a white zest, right? So they had a zest. Boris and them had a zest. And they get catch with the zest. And because they get catch with the zest, all man Jack tendered a resignation, and they put pressure on Boris, and they tell Boris, you had to fire the WOC. And so he eventually did. And of course, you know how the Brits are, full of humor about it. What I will say though is this. We had the opportunity to witness how a coup goes down in the UK Parliament, because that's pretty much what it was. A lot of external pressure brought to bear on a government, and the government imploded and collapsed. And you'll notice this. The government imploded and collapsed, and no other country talked about invading that country to stabilize the country. There was no talk of that at all. As a matter of fact, what you got was a lot of jokes pointing to the fact that the cabinet was gone. The cabinet was bare. There was no cabinet. And, now all of these MPs are probably looking for jobs somewhere. So yes, it was a coup. And I'm glad that we had the opportunity to see how these alleged developed countries, how they handle their business, one, and how when they handle their business, nobody else will ever say, well, we had a move in to do this, that, and the other. Because I could tell you, bet your bottom dollar, if it had happened in another type of country, let's say a Middle Eastern country, a Latin American country, a country in the Caribbean, for instance, you would have had other world powers beginning to shift and decide, well, do we have to move in to make sure that there is a stable transition? Nobody, not once, has said that they need to move in to 10 Downing Street to ensure that there is a stable transition of anything. And Boris has said he is remaining as the head of the Conservative Party, and so therefore as an interim prime minister, as a kind of caregiver prime minister, all the way down to October, right? So take note, pay attention to these things. Somebody say they want to know why is hair all over the place. I can't answer that. Correct, Kadeem. You never hear any of these other countries talking about needing to preserve democracy in a place like that. So it just shows you different strokes for different folks. What's the next thing? Ooh, over the weekend, real bacchanal in Sri Lanka. Now, let me tell all you why this whole Sri Lanka thing has me intrigued. Sri Lanka is part of the Asian subcontinent. Sri Lanka has 22 million persons, and I have for quite some time been paying attention to what was going on with their economy, because of course here, you know how we are. We tend to think in Trinidad and Tobago that everything that is happening only here. It's not happening in other parts of the world. So when I saw what was going on economically in Sri Lanka, I'd started posting stories about it. And so if you follow my page on Facebook, if you follow Newsauce on Facebook, you would have seen from time to time I was posting stories about Sri Lanka, what was going on with fuel, what was going on with their food shortages, what was going on with their foreign exchange. But it is only in the last couple days, in the lead up to this protest and this storming and taking over of the presidential mansion and basically, running the government out of town, it is only then that I started to dig a little deeper. All you could tell me is a family dynasty that was running Sri Lanka. How well you didn't tell me that? How all you didn't tell me a brother is the president, a next brother is the prime minister, and a next brother is the minister of finance? How all you ain't tell me that? So when I get up yesterday and see the bacchanal taking place in Sri Lanka, I say to myself, oh good, I know how the opposition behaves here. So I knew exactly what to expect. And I knew that once I went to pages that the opposition handles, I was going to see a lot of very nasty comments basically saying that they wish something like that could happen here and they want something like that to happen here, etc., etc., etc. So I'm there and I'm reading through the comments and I'm there thinking to myself, ignorance is really a painful thing, because in a lot of the comments that you saw streaming through, and Kevin Ramnarayan's page is one of the reasons I shared the link from his page, because he shared a link to when the mob took over the president's residence. And I read through the comment thread there, and the comment thread is, kind of stomach churning. But the thing that struck me the most wasn't so much the racist comments, because I expected and anticipated the racist comments. It was how little the commenters themselves knew and understood about the Sri Lankan situation. So I'm going to say this. The government that Sri Lanka just ran out of office was voted in 2019. That's what, 2-3 years ago? So it means that up until 3 years ago, the majority of Sri Lankans, or the majority of the Sri Lankan voter base, was quite happy with what was taking place politically. Because if they had a problem with the nepotism that has been displayed by this family, and let me just switch things up here, right? The Rajapaksa family. If they had a problem with how this family was running the country's affairs, you would not have voted the family back in 2019. So when I realized the extent of the nepotism taking place within the government, I'm there thinking to myself, but this was always ever a recipe for disaster. If you have a brother functioning as prime minister, a brother functioning as president, another brother functioning as the minister of finance, and other relatives holding key portfolios, what do you expect? Who is going to hold whom in check? And that's why, as much as we want to pound our system of governance here, as much as we just pound we system of governance here, the prime minister can't have his cousin, his sister, his nenen be the president. Nor can the prime minister have his cousin, his sister, his nenen be the chief justice. And those are the three arms of our democracy, right? President, prime minister, chief justice. three different arms of our democracy here. We also shouldn't, I'm not going to say that it hasn't happened in the past, and in the past when it happened, I spoke out and said it was not the right thing. We also should not be in a situation where you are hiring members of your family to work in key positions under you. And there really shouldn't be a situation where, as a sitting prime minister, you hire members of your family, or you swear in members of your family to function as government ministers. So I turn around and I watch in this scenario. If the Minister of Finance in Sri Lanka decide that he going to remove taxes, who gonna stop him? Because if he and his brother, who is the prime minister, sit down and decide this is the cabinet decision that we're going to make here, who going to stop them? So you see, no checks and balances, none whatsoever. And this is what happens when you decide that you're going to run a country as if it is a family business. And so there were a number of poor management things that took place under the last 3 years of the Rajapaksa tenure in government. Loans. There were a number of loans. It got to the point where their GDP was ridiculous, where their debt to GDP ratio was ridiculous as well. They stopped using pesticides and fertilizers, and that was let me slow it down. There are a number of things they did wrong. There was a lot of borrowing. They borrowed a lot of money, and there were a series of IMF loans that they took. And in one of the articles that I was reading, there were a series of loans from 2016 come forward. Then they had two economic shocks in that the pandemic hit their tourism industry hard, and then the goods and services that they were providing for sale, they were not providing as much goods and services for sale. So basically, they were importing more than they were exporting. Their revenue was much lower than their expenditure, and they were bleeding foreign exchange. Correct, and Perry, 16 IMF loans to date. And so the IMF stepped in with very, very intense measures. Y'all give me a second here. There's some. Kevin Henry, please remove those posts from my thread and remove them now. If you don't remove them, I'm blocking you from my page. You don't come and spam my comment thread like that. Are you crazy? This is not your life. Anyhow, back to the Sri Lanka issue. So there was a number of things that they would have done to mismanage the economy. And so that systematic mismanagement of the economy is what led to the forex shortage. It is also what led to what went on with fuel and fuel prices and their inability to purchase fuel, to purchase food. And so, of course, inflation skyrocketed and things went crazy. And it was only when things got to that breaking point that the population decided it wanted to get rid of the government. I don't know, but I feel like the minute you realize the president, the prime minister, and the minister of finance are brothers, that should send off some red flags for you. Right? That should set off some red flags for you. So that is them in Sri Lanka firing the work. I should let you all know that my guest is, he's here, he's in the green room, but he had to wait for me to finish, go through a couple more things. So then, another thing that happened this week is this piece of bacchanal. All your boy Philip Edward Alexander. Why Philip decide to mash my cone? Number one, Philip decide that he going to have a susu for jobs, right? He all of a sudden, his political party has become a recruitment agency. I don't know when he registered as a recruitment agency. I'm not sure. What I do know is when I check to see where 14 to 17 Victoria Square is in Port of Spain, 14 to 17 Victoria Square is the PEP head office in Port of Spain. So I thought to myself, well, why would a political party decide all of a sudden that is going to moonlight as a recruitment agency? And why does it need people to pay it $50 to sign up for jobs? Because usually when you are doing job fairs or you're trying to get jobs, it is the employers who pay to be at a job fair, to look for employees. It is the employers who will pay for the headhunting service. And then you're showing up at a political party's office to apply for a job, pay them $50 for this privilege of applying for a job. And I'm there thinking, people ain't working. Where they finding this $50 from? So they had to travel to Port of Spain, right? Because if it's Victoria Square have no big set of residents living around it. The majority of Port of Spain is a commercial area. So people traveling into Port of Spain. So you had to find money for passage. You find money for passage. You come into Port of Spain. You go by Philip and them political party office and you're giving them your personal information as well as $50. The whole thing just sounded like a real bad, corrupt susu to me, right? So line 1 worked this week and line 2 worked the next week and line 3 worked the week after. It was just, it was reeking of scam. So the minute I saw it, the absolute minute I see the post go up, because somebody sent me a screenshot of the post, the first thing I said was, well, this is what scam artists do, right? Grifters does grift. I put up the post and Philip immediately was up in his feels about the post, and he put out his own post telling people he want my phone number so he could have people call me to get a job. And I thought to myself, Philip, you really and truly thought that was going to frighten me? Me? You watching this level of battle axe and still think after all this time you could possibly frighten me? So, challenge accepted. And I posted more than 100 job vacancies in a 2-day period, which is far more than Philip was ever going to do for persons. Now, I want all to understand something. I was aware that there are job vacancies in the country. It's not that I wasn't aware, but I would have been aware mostly of the public sector jobs. I was not really paying attention to the private sector jobs that was available. When I started posting jobs and people started sending me things, and I have to thank my audience, lots of you saw ads, tagged me in things on Facebook, or sent me ads yourself via inbox. And I want to thank all of you who sent those links and tags and stuff to me. I didn't realize it had all of those different kinds of jobs available in the public domain. Didn't realize that at all. So it showed me a couple of things. One, we like to talk, and we like to talk in a vacuum. Because get onto social media, get onto Facebook any day of the week, and people just be bad talking the country left, right, and center without even knowing what they're talking about. It's very similar. The Sri Lankan situation is something that is similar. You get online, you're seeing people complaining and saying, well, what happened in Sri Lanka should happen here. And you pause and you think to yourself, but we don't have half the problems and challenges that the people of Sri Lanka would have had, because we've not been managing our economy in the same way. In Sri Lanka, one of the things that the government did was to promise to cut taxes to corporations. You know who's the last person to say that they're going to cut taxes for businesses? Kamala. 2020 general elections, it was one of the things that she said, that if she returned to office, businesses would be paying less taxes. And because in Sri Lanka, they cut taxes to businesses, they did some drastic tax cuts, it meant that they cut their revenue. And that's the thing we don't understand when we talk about tax cuts. If you are cutting taxes one way, it means that there is a drop in revenue from the other end. So that's the level of mismanagement that was taking place there. And you have Trinidadians this morning talking in a vacuum about what should happen here and what we don't have the belly to protest. And I'm going to talk about who have belly to protest just now, because we're moving into that. So we're talking about who have the belly to protest and don't have the belly to protest. And I'm there thinking to myself, where all the belly to protest Kamala still being only opposition leader? Because to me, that's one of the things people here need to get up and protest. That Kamala is still the political leader of the United National Congress. That she is still the opposition leader of this country. That's something that requires a protest to take place. And you're not going to find people protesting that because they want to have her there. So to me, if you want to keep Kamala in that position and you are happy to not protest Kamala being in that position, you can't be vexed with other people who do want to protest the current government or the sitting government. If that's their preference and they want to keep that government there and they don't want to run that government out of town, why are you vexed with them? If it means so much to you, you pick up yourself and start your protests. But don't turn around and tell other people what they can and cannot protest about. It's just, it's not for you. It's simply not for you. So, Mr. Philip decided that he was holding his susu. Decided he was charging people $50. Decided he wanted people's personal data. And I'm going to say this to you all. Don't give Philip your money. Don't give Philip your data. Philip cannot be trusted with people's money and he cannot be trusted with people's data. Punto final. I'm also going to say that if you need a job, from my experience this week, it's really not that hard to locate the employment opportunities in this country. You just have to search. And when I say search, pick up your phone, right? Take up your smartphone and type in the information on your smartphone, and you are going to see all of the ads just start popping up. Because that's what I would have done. I went to some of the pages of different entities and corporations and stuff, but after you started to do searches, things just coming up. So it's not that there aren't jobs available, and it is a wide spectrum, skilled and unskilled, specialized labor and unspecialized labor. So there are options out there, folks. You don't have to give Philip your money and you don't have to give Philip your personal information. So that was that. Oh, so this is to do with the Paria matter. So we finally got QC Lynch showing up here. And there are a couple things that we need to take note of from that press conference. So the Paria, the Commission of Inquiry into the Paria LCMS diving incident took place on Thursday. And it was another one of those situations where the media let us down. But I want you all to listen to a couple of things, right? First, you're going to listen to QC Lynch. Then I want you to listen to the lawyer for the commission, Ramesh Lawrence Maraj, SC. And then you're going to listen to one part of the question and answer session.
This is your inquiry. You, the public. It is a public inquiry conducted on behalf of the President for you. I want you to be part of it, and to that end we will ensure that it is available online to view, that documents and evidence can be accessed by everyone, and that the public hearings are conducted allowing observation and participation at all times conducive to the public. And if that means sitting in the evenings for your convenience rather than ours, then that is what will happen. We will be the opening the public part of this inquiry on a date which I had hoped was going to be in August, but I'm afraid it's going to have to be pushed back by a couple of days, and it is now going to be... 7th of September. Thank you. You see, I mean, how I have to rely on him already. The 7th of September will be the first day upon which this will be heard. It will be at 10:30, I think, on that day.
So that was QC Lynch, and that was his opening statement to the media. What I want you all to listen to now is what Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, SC, is going to say are the terms of reference for the commission. This is important information. And then I'm going to let you listen to the first question from the press conference, and then we're going to talk just for a few minutes, right?
The aims and objectives of the Commission of Inquiry include the following: to inquire into the circumstances which led to the tragic deaths, to identify the precise facts and circumstances which led to and resulted in the loss of life, to identify whether Paria and LMCS had in place any life-saving contingency plans in the event that life-threatening incidents occur. If they had such life-saving contingency plans, whether any such plans were employed in response to those incidents, whether they employed sufficient safeguards and measures to ensure the safety of the contracted employees, the prevention of the incidents, and to rescue the 5 divers, to examine the role played by Paria and LMCS through their respective units in dealing with these incidents. The Commission is to make such findings, observations, and recommendations arising out of its deliberations as they deem appropriate in relation to 1, whether there has been any breach of duty by any persons or entities, whether there are any grounds for any criminal proceedings to be initiated against any person or entities, whether criminal proceedings should be recommended to the Director of Public Prosecutions for its consideration, the appropriate and best practices and or policies and or procedures to be utilized by companies such as Paria and LMCS for the conduct of these types of maintenance exercises in response to these types of incidents, the policies, measures, and mechanisms and systems that should be implemented to prevent the recurrence of the tragic incidents which occurred on Friday the 25th, 2022, and continuing up to the recovery of the bodies of the 4 LMCS divers, and making any other recommendations that may be deemed necessary in the circumstances.
Now, those terms of reference are really important. I'm watching all on the comment thread, and I see all find the QC hot and all ready to get married to a British man and thing. So you see the same way all responding there, where all see him and all find good. That man good looking and I like his British accent. That is precisely what happened with the journalists and them. Because after Senior Counsel Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj read out the entire terms of reference, members of the media came back and asked a set of very stupid questions. They were asking questions about how information going to be collected, how the evidence going to be recorded, all kinds of foolishness. And if you had listened to the entire press conference, the press conference is about 54 minutes long, Ramesh Lawrence Maharaj, Senior Counsel, addressed all of those issues in his opening statements. Not just the clip there, because I only played 2 minutes of his speaking time. He may have spoken for about somewhere between 7 to 10 minutes, but the terms of reference were critical. They were very important. And then you got down to the question and answer session, and everybody giggling with the man like they want to be friend on Facebook and see if they could slide into EDMs, right? So let's take a look at that part of the press conference.
TV6 Chairman Lynch, if I can address you that way.
Yes, you may.
Well,
Bring the microphone a little bit closer to you.
Sure. Oh,
That's much better. You don't need to shout, though.
I just wanted to start by asking, we saw your extensive background. Can you say if you've had any experience in something even similar to what you're now being called upon to be a part of? I know you would have alluded to being a diver. I imagine not professionally, because
Well, it helped me to help myself. If they've given you the man's CV and they would have provided the CV of the various commissioners. The CV is going to break down all of the things that he has done year by year in chronological order. You come in to ask the man if he has ever done something like this before, his CV will tell you that. And you're there blushing down the place and laughing and giggling down the place. There was a point in the press conference when they asked him how long is he going to be in Trinidad for? How long does he intend to stay in Trinidad for? And QC Lynch had to ask them, why are you inviting me out for a drink? It was so glaringly obvious that their questions were weak and that they were all just kind of sitting there in awe. And I thought to myself, I have to rely on these persons to ask sharp, incisive questions. I had to rely on media to represent my interests in a room. Because the things I wanted to have be asked was were they going to be sticking to only the persons that were immediately impacted on by the incident, or were they going to be bringing in expert testimony from different areas? Because they did. Senior Counsel Ramesh Lawrence Maraj did indicate how they were going about getting witness statements and when things are going to start. So we're looking at a September the 7th start to things, and they have indicated, QC Lynch indicated that it will be televised, and they're going to, if it means that they have to do it, have the hearings in the evening versus having it during the day so the entire country will be able to listen to it, they will do that. So I am looking forward to the televised version of the Commission of Inquiry, because I certainly intend to be doing my own analysis here. I'm not going to rely on local media to ask the right questions, because clearly they can't even get beyond giggling with a Queen's Counsel at a press conference. It was, it was embarrassing. If you all get a chance, you should look at the entire thing. So I'm going to shift now to talking about Roadblock and how the Roadblock was impacting on people getting to work and not getting to work. And my guest, I'm going to let my guest know that this is the last bit of things that I need to talk about. So in about 5 minutes or so, you could get back in. So folks, this week we saw amazing scenes, and let me tell you the amazing scenes we saw. We saw members of the opposition in support of persons from East Port of Spain and Port of Spain and environs being part of protests in the country. Why? Because they felt that the protest action would redound to their benefit. So, I want us to be focused on a particular thing. The protests happen in light of something. What's the event that the protests happened in light of? 3 young boys in a car of about 5 young men were shot to death by the police. And the initial stories coming out of the TTPS was that there were guns and that the boys in the car were firing on the police, or I should say the young men, because it's only one boy who's 17. The young men in the car were firing bullets at the police, and so the police took action. Later on in the week, we would have gotten a new story that showed that, or that indicated that the forensic reports said that the boys were all shot, the boys who died were all shot in the back of their heads. The other thing that has changed in the course of this story evolving throughout the week is whether or not there was actually a gun in the car. In one instant, you heard that there was a gun. Then you heard that the gun was one pistol, a Smith & Wesson pistol. Then you heard eyewitnesses claiming that they saw the police planting what appeared to be a weapon in the car. And then, interestingly enough, the other young men that were in the car, the other 2 young men that were in the car, they were released without charges. And I thought that was odd. Why? Because normally, if it's a situation where people in a car were shooting at the police and you detained or arrested persons who were in the car, they would be charged with possession of the firearm, whether it was actually their firearm or not, because they would have been in the car when the firearm was in use. So I thought, but this is odd, and this story seems to be changing and shifting and morphing. So the murders, the killings would have happened early this Saturday morning. And then Monday, as I anticipated, because the minute I heard about the killings, I said to myself, the communities that were impacted on by this killing, they are going to make sure that they protest and hit the country where it hurts. And since everything you have is centered in the capital, everybody had to come into the capital, and these communities continue to be residents of the capital, it stands to reason that they would shut down the capital. I don't know why it came as a surprise to other people that the capital has been shut down. And I'm fed up saying we need to decentralize these offices that we have in the capital city. And we also need to grasp that a work from home solution means that there'll be fewer persons in the capital city when these things happen. So the protest took place. I anticipated the protest. I knew something like that was going to happen. I also knew that people were going to be very upset and up in arms and have all manner of nasty things to say about the residents from these communities. So the racism didn't shock me or surprise me. It didn't surprise me either that without evidence, we all assumed that the 5 young men in the car were all criminals and bandits without them ever having any sort of record. So we ain't see no police record, we ain't see no rap sheet or anything like that, but we automatically knew that because these young men were from particular communities, we could identify them as bandits. We automatically knew as a society, the same society that don't know where to find jobs, right? We automatically knew that these fellas had to be what? Baby bandits. All of them had to be killers. Yes, they open fire on the police. We haven't yet learned to wait for information and to take our time analyzing things. So none of what transpired surprised me. We have been a violent society for quite some time. The TTPS here has been exercising a certain amount of impunity for quite some time, long before one shot, one kill. But one shot, one kill gave them a certain degree of license. It gave them a certain degree of public endorsement of a particular kind of behavior. And I'm going to say this. If you want to run with the idea of one shot, one kill, then all police officers need to have body cams. All police cars need to have dash cams. And every single police officer needs to have working body cameras. This can't be optional anymore. It has to be mandatory. Because this business of police killings happening too often. And every single time it happens, everybody flares up. Protests flares up. Port of Spain shuts down. And nothing happens until the next killing. And there's a lot about the killing of those young men in downtown Port of Spain by Chacon Street there that reminds me of the murders of 3 men in Caledonia Mova a couple of years ago, 2020. And the interesting thing is, just last week, we talked about the anniversary of the killing of the 3 men in Mova. I don't have anything further to say beyond body cameras and dash cameras need to be mandatory by this point in time. I'm going to have to deal with the Prime Minister and his position on parenting, but at another point, because I want us to get into another kind of conversation now. I want us to get into a conversation about money and money matters and what we're doing with money and how we can take money, any little bit of money that we have and get it to work for us. And so I got a friend of mine, a good friend of mine. You know, we just be giving one another enough kicks on social media when the day come. I wanted to allow my boy Antonio Ross to come on and explain a couple things to us. So Ross, you all set and ready for me? I don't put you on the people's screen, so they see it here.
Yeah. man.
Right. I'm trying to shift this thing around a little bit because it okay, that's what I'll do. Right. But I'm trying to move it from over your mouth and I'm not figuring out how to I'm not figuring out how to do that. I don't know why. Okay, I'll move that. I'll put your name on in a little bit. Right. So Ross, good evening and thanks for being here.
Good night. Good night. Thanks for inviting me again.
No, it's
good to be here.
It's always good to have you on because I mean, you know, there's a way in which you deliver information. There's a way in which you you break it down in a very, very, very digestible way and that works for people. So you're all set. Don't shift any further. And you know your female fan club on and they're here and they want to see you and so don't shift too much, right? If you could ups a little bit more so that we see in, you know, right. Good. Yes. Nice. So, Sherry Ann Scantlebury wants to see the jacket. Perhaps you can stand up a little bit, Ross, so that she can see the jacket.
Yeah, man. Me one brand.
Okay, nice. It's a very nice jacket. I love the colors on it. So,
thanks very much.
So, Declan, I invite you here this evening because I want to talk about ways to deal up with money, and it's because the thing that prompted me to reach out to you, apart from the fact that yes, we know each other and we talk about these things all the time, it was the position you had taken on the FCB APO. Because when you wrote about it, that post that you put up about it, it got me to understand a lot better how an APO, the additional offering, how it can work for you. And then after reading that post, I was having a conversation with Tech Guy, who now calls himself 4K, whatever that means. So me and 4K were having a conversation, and he was explaining something to me about an investment his mother had made with a credit union and how that got him launched as a videographer, what he does now for a living. And I said, you know what? Let me talk to Ross. Ross is a man who know money, and he know small money, and he know medium-sized money, and he know big money. So I want 5 ideas from you. Just 5, because I want to make it easy and digestible for the audience for now, right? 5 ideas from you that could help persons to use whatever money they have, or to help persons invest better. That's the word I want to use. Invest better, because it doesn't always boil down to money. I know that. So let me take it from there.
So to kick it off, I want to kind of roll back just a little before I go through the list of 5 things, which I eventually posted today. But I want to say that each and every one on this live is the CEO of their own household. So let's look at it from that perspective. You is the CEO of your own house. I guess Big Boy is, sorry, what's the dog name?
Starboy.
Starboy is one of your constituents in your household, and you is the CEO of your little household. And if you look at it from that perspective, every individual manages their household, income, expenditure, etc., etc. So from that perspective, you're the CEO of your household. Not all CEOs have money. So you'll have small income or sometimes unemployed persons. Still the CEO, not much income, almost no income, but guess what? All CEOs have time. Some have more time, some have more money. Some have less time, some have less money. So let's look at it that way. And the purpose of the CEO is to maximize the use of the time or money to grow the resources available for that household. All right? So your household is your little company, you is the CEO, you have time and or money, and that's the whole gambit. So let's look at from the perspective of how do you secure the bag in a small or medium income? Simple. Could you see this?
Yes, I can see it. Purple passion fruit. Call it, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So this could have pumpkin seeds, this could have been sweet peppers, this could have been anything. The point being, 5 packs of these probably going to run you up $25. So if you're in a low income household, you could still get 5 packs of seeds of various vegetables. Take a half of a drum at the back of your house or whatever little space you have, even old 2-liter, but cut them out, put some soil, and you could grow something in your backyard. Even if your backyard is concrete, you could actually still grow in a vessel on the concrete in your little backyard. Some people might be living in apartments, so we could make allowances for those type of people as well.
But
At the end of the day,
why passion fruit in your backyard?
that's what I have. But what I would say is it could be pumpkin seeds. It could be peppers. It could be cabbage. It could be okra. Things that are very easy and simple to grow. If you have a slightly bigger backyard, it could be some cassava. It could be piece of yam. If you have a drain like we did back in the day when we were growing up country, the whole drain would have been lined with dashing bush, which ultimately would yield dashing bush and
dasheen, the root crop. So dasheen and callaloo bush.
So even though we're talking about generating income, we also reducing spending by investing time, a couple seeds into creating and generating something that has tangible value, something you'd normally buy at the market that you don't need to buy. And when you tally it up with your $25 pack of seeds, you might probably save in your little backyard garden for the whole year about a 5,000 to 10,000 TT dollars. And if you have excess, you could sell it, you could share it with your neighbors, etc. You could exchange it if your neighbor also have a little garden, etc., etc. So that's for small and medium income. Now, if you have medium income, meaning you're making a decent salary, you have a little savings, just like you did, you could start a hydroponic farm. Again, some for home use, excess, you could run it through the NAMDEFCO system, or if you have children, bring out the entrepreneurial spirit, let them sell it on the roadside, just the way we used to do in the country. You're driving along the main road. In most parts of Trinidad, well, generally except the north, and everybody is selling something on the side of the road.
But a lot of people, there are stigmas surrounding that. They don't want people to see them selling on the side of the road. They don't want people to see them selling in the market. It have people who have that kind of pridefulness about them. We want people to see this, or they want people to feel they're catching their ass. You know what I mean? So, but I'm glad that you're making the connection between using the few resources you have to either make money or save money, because it's one of the things that I noticed the minute I set up the system here in my yard, right? I was not spending the same kind of money either in the grocery or in the market. I wasn't spending the same kind of money. So when I went to the market now, because I do more of my shopping in the market than in the grocery, but when I went to the market, I was getting fewer things from the market because I was supplementing my table with things from my aquaponics system. And that was, at first I didn't factor it in, but I was saving money, and that was money that I could use towards something else. So, all right, that was just my 2 cents inside it.
Right. So, that's just one way. Another way is, again, for small and medium income earners. If you have a hobby, for example, some people know how to sew. Some people know how they like fashion, they like to do nails, they like to do hair. You could start a little business home. I have a sister who has a full-time job, and she picked up this nail thing as a hobby, and now after years of practice, now she's doing that and still has a job. So during COVID, when she was home for 2 years, that's what she was doing to make that extra side money. It have people who I know, some of them on the live here, who do sewing. They work for other people. But I know if I need to get my suit adjusted, I just had to call home girl and tell she are coming by to get it adjusted and pay for that service, right? So if somebody has a hobby, they could use it to earn dollars. And this stigma that you're speaking about, we need to have that entrepreneurial spirit and understand that part of this whole thing is about hustling. And encouraging and letting children, younger people know that this is about hustling and not about just being in your little comfort zone, sit down home and mommy and daddy doing everything for you. Try to figure out ways to earn income. if somebody really in a situation where they need money, they'll figure it out. With a little push, with a little knowledge, with a little encouragement, they should be able to convert that hobby or hustle into a business.
But there are a lot of people who
Debbie,
who
who is on the slide, people who are thought about that, you know. Yes, you're home sewing, you're sewing a lot of stuff home. Don't run out into renting a big space, you know. Creep before you walk.
right. So
Establish
now,
it.
so I want to ask you for a practical thing like that. Explain to me how Debbie would have taken her hobby and turned it into a hustle, making that extra income, that side income.
Well, the truth is she had it a little opposite. She actually went and had a business, and the business was failing.
Okay.
And within the discourse, I showed her where she moved too quickly from hustle to business. And what she should be doing, granted that I do like people coming in my place, get past that stigma, secure a separate room in your house, and operate like a small home office and run your business from there. And then when you've secured it to the extent where you're generating sufficient revenue to cover rent, you become a proper business. So a lot of times a hustle may never become a business. A hobby may never become a full-fledged business. But however, you could still earn income from that.
And so is that what she's doing now? Is she working elsewhere and also earning from her side hustle?
That's correct, because sometimes you could almost never convert that side hustle into a big, sufficiently large business to carry cost. So that's working out for her right now.
Debbie making you out, she say it as both people.
Yeah,
When this is what, and when you're giving financial advice?
well, Debbie kind of hardened to her, so
Well, how do you, as a
I mean-
as an advisor, because that's important, right? You're dealing up with different personalities and different, I guess, different approaches to making money, and different people will behave in different ways. As a financial advisor, how are you motivating people to get past the stubbornness or to get past the reluctance and stuff?
well, I mean, I would like to believe that I have reasonable conversations with people to the point where I could convince them that their way has not been working. And it's really to convince people to try this now. See how this go work. Think about this. And it's really about thinking. You got to sit and think. A lot of people don't think through all the steps. They got to get from step 1 to step 10, but they get up to 3 and they're stunted. They don't know who to turn to for help, etc., etc. It's usually about a lot of people not knowing who to ask for help, and they're stuck. And sometimes they go from step 3 to step 10, and those steps that they missed out, those are the critical ones that they would have needed to be successful.
Okay. All right. What's your next bit of advice?
Well, I would say invest in people.
What do you mean by that?
Well, let me roll back a little bit. Continuous investment in yourself, first of all. Education. For example, let's say you have a bachelor's degree. You have a job paying you a little 15,000, but you know that if you do a master's degree, you're going to get promoted and you're going to earn more income. If you look at yourself as a CEO and you are the CEO of you and your household, if you want to earn more income for yourself and your household, upgrade your skills. If you know you're an okay so-so mechanic or a so-so electrician, or you know how to sew but you ain't so great, go and do an extra course. Invest in yourself. And most of all, invest in your health, because you cannot enjoy none of that stuff if you don't invest in your own health.
What do you mean by investing in your health?
Well, imagine, well, it's a sad story for a lot of us. Imagine a few and a lot of us, there are people who we know who have been wildly successful but never took care of themselves. By the time they get to 55, after investing in first degree, second degree, PhD, doctor, big house, big mansion, 10 cars, 55 years old, kick the bucket.
Okay.
Or 50 years old with a preventable, an illness that could have been prevented, and now severely ill to the point where all the revenue from this business, this household that you're running, goes into medical bills.
So you're saying that looking after your health is one of the ways in which you can be investing in yourself for future.
Course.
Right. Okay.
Correct, because it increases the longevity and the health state of the business. If you look at yourself as a business, as a CEO of the household, then take care of the business.
Okay.
You don't take, you think we don't say if you don't take care of you, you can't take care of your household and your children.
Agreed.
Right?
I agree that we take our health for granted. One of the things that the pandemic showed us, for instance, is that we have a high percentage of non-communicable diseases here. A lot of people have comorbidities, and you saw how this virus fed into those comorbidities, and people who you thought were healthy died as a result of, all of those underlying conditions.
Sadly, yes, that is the situation that we were in. And I mean, a lot of people need to take their health more seriously as part of investing in themselves.
Agreed. What's the next point?
So the next point I would make is after investing in yourself, invest in people. Now, since we're speaking about it from a household perspective, invest in your children. For example, so you're in a small house, small income household, not making no set of money, but education is free. Make sure you train according to how the old people used to say, take the book. The thing free. So even though you may not be wildly successful from a financial perspective, your children, by way of having had some measure of either technical knowledge, meaning it could be even if it's woodworking or mechanic or something, for those who may not be so inclined to get a master's degree or a bachelor's degree or a PhD or even a couple subjects, they still now have the opportunity to earn income and to contribute to the same household, especially in the case of when you have extended families where we have a few people pooling resources, nobody not making no big money, but enough to manage the household successfully.
I want to make a plug here I want to add to what you're saying. I think there are lots of people who don't have manual skills or technical vocational skills. They didn't pay attention. Either they weren't raised in an environment where they were taught those things, or they didn't attend schools where, those were subjects. And I feel there's a whole adult education program that allows you to learn those things, and it's useful to have those skills. So to go and get those skills, even if it is later on in life, because you end up having, it could be a hobby, it could be a way to cut repair costs, because me and lying to tell you, when I have to call in workmen, is real money I just be spending when I call in workmen, So I'm agreeing with the comment there about investing in yourself from an education perspective.
Correct, but like I said, also invest in your children, and for those who don't have children, invest in the people in your immediate family circle, meaning your niece, your nephew. I remember my dad, and I could go through the list of my first cousins who he sent to school, because he had a little bit more than his brothers and sisters from an education perspective, from an occupational perspective, and from a financial perspective, and he leveraged those things despite having a lot of his own children, to ensure that a lot of my first cousins and his own brothers and sisters were able to attend school.
Okay.
And that is part of the generational wealth conversation that we keep talking about. But you cannot have that if you're not spreading that money and making that money work for the rest of the generation.
What else? What other bits of advice do you have for the listeners before we wrap up?
We're still on number 4, so I'll just add this other piece, which ties into the FCB IPO. Invest in property, invest in businesses, invest in stocks, shares, and bonds. This is more applicable to medium income owners. And I wanna give a little simple example. You see what I have here, right?
$100 and a $5. That's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing $100 on one side, a $5 bill on another side.
One of the examples that I've given on one of the previous posts is that let's make the assumption that you are offered this $105 today, right? This is what you're gonna get, right? 12 months today with a 5% rate of inflation, this is actually what it's worth.
$100. So the $105 I get in today, in 12 months' time, it will be worth $100 because of inflation.
And 12 months after that, it'll be 95. And 12 months after that, it'll be about 90.
Okay. So then how do I get the $105 to become more than $105?
By getting an interest rate higher than the rate of the inflation.
Okay.
And you cannot get that from the bank. So you'll have to invest either in, if you're in a medium income owner, buy an extra little piece of land, build a little extra house, use it as a rental income, invest in a business, purchase stocks, the same APO. And I've used the example of at $50 a share, the historical share price of that particular stock is closer to $70. So if you take $1,000 Trinidad and you invest it in that stock, you're almost certain with economic recovery over a medium to a long term to have closer to $1,400.
Can I use myself as an example? I invested in the IPO the first time around, right? I bought some shares on the IPO. And apart from the worth of the shares themselves, I get $1,200 more every year because every quarter I get about $300 or $400 in interest or dividends or whatever is the term for it, right? Now, that money goes into my savings account. I don't touch it. It just goes into my savings account and it sits there. And so it basically for the last however many years of having purchased those shares, I have $1,200 on top of $1,200 on top of $1,200 sitting down in an account that's associated with the shares. So of course with this APO, I'm looking to buy some more shares so that I can increase how much money I make quarterly from the shares to go into the savings account.
That is a very good example, and I would basically lean towards encouraging people to learn a little bit more, because a lot of people who don't invest in this sort of stuff is because one, they don't know, and not knowing makes people fearful for their money.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of examples of it, and again, it's the same thing. Ask for help. Go to the bank, ask the bank to direct you to their stockbroker, because the First Citizens Bank also owns a brokerage company, or Google stockbrokers in Trinidad. There's a whole list, and you can just pick the phone up, call, go sit down, talk to them, tell them, me, I don't sit a big money, and I only have a little 10,000, a little 1,000. I want to start something, I want to learn how to invest. They will evaluate financial situation, give you advice as to what is the best way for you to invest your money, because it's not the same for everybody based on their knowledge, the amount of disposable income they have, and their age, etc. So
yeah, correct. So what else? Yes, I was gonna ask, what else do you have for the audience, because they're taking in everything you're saying.
Protect that investment. If you invest, protect it. How? By upgrading and updating your knowledge to be able to evaluate that investment and to modify that same investment so that you'll have generational wealth to pass on. Don't do that, you will have nothing to pass on, because inevitably all of us will soon become dust at some point.
Correct.
I don't know. Some people believe they're going to live forever. I'm really happy for them, right? But I know that I will have to distribute whatever I have to either my children or the immediate family members. But you want to make that bag as big as possible for them. For you, because you know it.
Well,
I mean, sorry, you're not doing it.
No, yeah, the thing
Right.
is, I listen. I understand every single thing you're saying, and I'm gonna continue to use myself as a for example. So, I own property, I own shares, I own a vehicle, I have a job, and I have, well, I can't call it a side hustle no more, right? Because the hustle is a big hustle. So you have your jobs, or rather I should say, I have multiple streams of income. I have those things. What I have noticed is this. When I first bought the shares, I bought the shares just thinking of it as, well, I had some money, I had a lump sum of money, and I wanted to invest the money in something. I didn't really think too much about what the shares was going to do for me. But every single time I've gone to the bank about anything, to do anything, the shares come up as, well, this is a source of collateral. And
Correct.
so the shares have been working for me in a number of ways. It's the same thing with the unit trust money that I would have invested. And I want to bring in Tech Guy's example here now. Tech Guy's mom opened a credit union account for him when he was a little child. And she used to put, whenever she had money to put into the account, she would put money into the account. And then when he became an adult, like, 18, 19, somewhere thereabouts, she handed him the passbook. And of course, there was a certain amount of money in it. And he used
Much 4K.
probably 4K. But he used the money in the account to buy camera equipment to start a business, as a small business. And it's that camera equipment he bought to start his small business as a videographer that then kind of launched him. And so he is a hardcore believer in credit union and getting shares and that sort of thing. And so he is at the point where he is beginning to look at investments and expand his portfolio in a particular way. I'm saying all of this to get people to understand that you could look like me and you could look like Ross. Well, they don't know what Tech Guy look like, right? But it's safe to assume that Tech Guy kind of resembles me. So you could look like me and you could look like Ross and not be afraid of money and investments and using your money to expand your wealth in a particular way. Because I think that's one of the challenges we have. We've been fed this idea for so long that black people can't handle money and black people not good with money, that some people are actually afraid to invest. It's not that they don't have some savings somewhere in us, but they're just afraid to do something with the money.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I deliberately use the example of a pack of seeds.
Yeah.
Because it is this simple to start. It is really this simple.
Mm-hmm.
But some people try to make it out to believe like if it's this mystic. No, it ain't that. I mean, there's a lot of information and knowledge around us, and as long as we could read and understand, most of us should be able, if we're interested and if we really want to run our household better, to make and create an opportunity where we're not just being given a bread,
Mm-hmm.
like certain people, but catching fish.
Mm-hmm. Correct. And it's important to know how to catch fish and how to make the bread, not just how to buy the
Correct.
bread and buy the fish. I get you with that entirely. And of course, how to protect all of those things. So Russ, thank you so much for this brief tutorial you'd have given us about how to get started with investing and investment. I'm going to be bringing you back because there are a couple more things we have to talk about in terms of spreading the wealth around within your community. So we're going to have you back. Okay?
Thanks very much, Rhoda, for having me again. The only thing I want to say, though, is this.
Yeah.
There's two people I wouldn't give my money to.
Red woman and who? Let me hear. Because I know it's some red woman joke you're going to make it.
Line 13 and my mother.
Line 13 and your mother? Why ain't giving your mother the money, boy?
Mother ain't giving back no money, partner. I don't make too much in stocks all day, every day. Line 13 and my mother is not an investment.
I hear
That is
you.
a give out.
No, I hear
No.
you. I hear you. And
So, in front of DSS, line 13 and my mother.
No, listen, that DSS thing continues to stress me out, you know. I mean, I know I just joke about it, but the fact that people take their good hard-earned money and went and put it in this thing, boy, lord. So line 13 on your mother.
And be fearful of stocks, you know. The same people, you know.
Well, that's the thing. I was on a thread on my Newsauce page, and there were people who jumped on and they were bad talking the FCB APO. They were bad talking it, and I said on it, I said, but the same people who hear bad talking this APO is the same people who would have invested the money in line 13. No lie, you know. It was men who I knew were waiting on the payout from DSS bad talking the APO. And I was like, huh? Really?
But line 13 holding strong, you know it is.
Well, you see, the thing about it is, line 13 touched on their emotions, not on their logic. Line 13 come to them and tell them, invest and you'll get back way more than you actually invested, and we breaking you out of poverty, this, that, and the other. Whereas that's not how FCB is pitching there. That's not how they pitch in their message. They pitch in their message in a more conservative sort of way. But the thing about it is, the same way you could have take your 1,500 or your 2,000 or your 5,000 and put it in DSS. You could take that money and buy shares, and you'll be making a lot of dividends every quarter.
Correct.
Ah, boy. But if you're running down fast money, you would feel that shares is not something to invest in. Whereas, well, we saw what happened with the fast money, right? Anyhow, Ross, thank you very much. It's time for me to wrap up. I think we keep people here long enough. So thanks for spending your Sunday evening with me. It was lovely as ever. Take care, my dear.
Thanks very much.
No problem.
Have a blessed night.
You too, dear.
Bye.
Bye. So, that's where we're wrapping it up, folks. That's where I am leaving you all. We did a review of the major stories for the week. We had a conversation with Antonio Decklan Ross, that I'd wanted to have for the longest while. I wanted to be able to talk about money and investment, and I wanted to start that conversation about money and investment here with us. And so, we're going to continue having more conversations. So I will see you guys next week. I'll let you know if I'm doing something on Friday. If I'm not doing something on Friday, definitely next week Sunday. All right? And next week Sunday, the mask mandate is going to be over and done with. So we could stop masking. Well, I might still be masking. You all have yourselves a good evening and a great week. Keep it safe.